What's up, guys? Toad back with you as always. It was a 1-1 night last night. The baseball game lost. The final score looked worse than it actually was. It was actually 2-0, I think, through five. Wound up being an 8-0 blowout win for the Dodgers, but I did not expect Bueller to hold the Mets completely scoreless throughout the time that he was in there. What can you do, man? I mean, he put guys on base, got away with it. Severino was a bit worse than expected, and that was it. The college football game saved the night as UTEP not only covered but won outright. Fairly easy cover there at the very least, and fairly easy outright win, actually, to be honest. So that one was right. So the money line hit on that meant that it was a slight winning day. Let's get back to it today, man. What do we got on tap today? Both baseball series are in action today. So we got Yankees and Cleveland. This is game 3 as the series shifts to Cleveland. They were off yesterday. Yankees lead the series 2-0 after taking both of the first 2 games at home. This is going to be Clark Schmidt against Matthew Boyd. Yankees down from -115 to -114 is a slight road favorite in this one. So the odds makers, again, telling you who the better team is here. But to me, personally, I do think that there is some value in fading the Yankees in this one, just with the fact that you're getting Cleveland as a home underdog price. And I think the starting pitching matchup is not necessarily that great for the Yankees. And at the very least, I think this is probably the Yankees' weakest starter going today. So that's kind of how I look at this game. 58% of tickets, but 65% of the cash on the Yankees. I'm not sure how to read into that, really, because the line looks like it has dropped a little bit. The Yankees undoubtedly are going to be public in this game, as the recreational bettors are not going to want anything to do with Cleveland with Matthew Boyd on the hill if they're down 0-2 in the series, even if the series has shifted to Cleveland and it's a must-win, essentially, at this point. But you never know with the Yankees. What if they blow a 3-0 lead? We all remember that happened once. Yeah, let's reminisce about the better times. 2004 ALCS. No, so total in this one's down from 8 juice to the under to 7.5 juice to the under. So it looks like it's moved a little bit on the under. Public over, 90% of the tickets, 98% of the cash. This is no longer in Yankee Stadium, so it's not as hitter-friendly a park. I don't want anything to do with this total, though. And as you'll see in a second, Schmidt doesn't have very good numbers against Cleveland. Boyd is probably going to be only going a few innings to open this game. Most likely, I think he's just going to go with kind of an opener, and then Cleveland's going to go to their bullpen, especially with having yesterday off. Cleveland can go to the bullpen in this one, and their bullpen is pretty good. Both of these teams have good bullpens, so it's kind of a mix there where you kind of expect the starters to do worse than the bullpens in this one. So the total, very difficult read, although I don't think I'd want to be on an over when it's this public either, but that is a tough read. I think the best way to play this game, if you wanted to play it, I'm not doing so, but would be to take Cleveland as the moneyline underdog here and just take the shot with them. Kind of a last gasp for Cleveland, even though I know they're not down 3-0 yet. But Clark Schmidt, I mean, he is probably the most vulnerable of the Yankees pitchers, even though I know he had a 2.85 ERA, 1.18 whip this season. He improved pretty dramatically over what he'd done in the previous year. So he had a good season. I don't know if it's all that great of an indicator because his career stats are not quite as good as this, but definitely had a good season. He's made one postseason start so far in that series against Kansas City, and that wasn't great. He went 4 2/3, allowed 2 earned runs, did have a 4-1 strikeout walk ratio, gave up 4 hits. It was an okay start. He got pulled a little bit early, so I don't know if that's going to be happening again. This is the other thing with baseball. You don't know when these starters are actually going to get pulled, so you kind of have to look at what has their usage been recently to kind of figure out how deep is this guy going to go. And he hasn't gone more than 5 innings, basically, or 5 2/3, I guess, going all the way back to mid-May. So since he came back off the injury list, basically, or off the DL or whatever it is now, he's only gone 5 2/3 once and gone less than that in every other start. So he has seemingly kind of been limited a bit, although he's run up some high pitch counts, though. So I don't know. It seems like kind of a mixed bag, but they don't seem to be totally unleashing him. But I think we'll expect him to at least probably go mostly a starter's workload, probably close to 5 innings in this one, unless he really gets rattled. But Cleveland, in 38 at-bats, they haven't done bad off him. 9.6 strikeout walk ratio. They have a 395 average, 925 OPS. It's not a huge sample size. It's a decent sample size, and some of these Cleveland hitters do get to Schmidt. So his stats are not very good against Cleveland. And then on the other side, Boyd put together good numbers this season as well. 2.72 ERA, 1.13 whip. But he's a guy who's a little bit older in his 30s. And it's a scenario I've talked about before where he has not done anything like this throughout the rest of his career. So kind of strange that he put up numbers like this. So I think it was because a lot of it was because they weren't having him go like really long starts for the most part. I mean, he did earlier in the season, and he actually didn't do that bad either, but he only got into their rotation and started pitching in August. So he really didn't pitch that much this year. So it is a small sample size, but they also started limiting his innings. He's pitched twice in the playoffs, and he's not allowed any runs in the playoffs in 6 2/3 innings across the two kind of opener types of starts, basically in a 10-3 strikeout walk ratio. So you can kind of tell that when he's in his earlier innings, he's actually better. He's like striking out more guys. So that's good. He has his better stuff at that point. Only allowed, 5 hits, not horrible. And of course, no runs. So his usage in the playoffs has actually been pretty effective for Cleveland. But again, he's probably going to be out of the game. 3 or 4 innings into the game, I would imagine. And Cleveland's going to then go to their bullpen. Against the Yankees, we have 33 at-bats worth. Strikeout walk ratio is bad, 5-9, but 5 of the walks are Aaron Judge. So he kind of pitches around Judge, and then 3 to Trevino, and everybody else combined only has 1 walk, which is Soto. So I don't know if he just pitches around Soto, or pitches around Judge, or not, but he has held him to a 242 batting average, though, so they don't have a lot of hits off him. But he has allowed 2 home runs, 1 to Soto, 1 to Judge, 859 OPS, so it's a little bit of a high OPS. Small sample size, though, but overall, his numbers in this specific matchup, they're a little bit better than Schmidt's. So, all in all, yeah, I think I would probably, I would lean to the Cleveland side, and actually because Boyd's OPS is actually high against the Yankees hitters, that actually kind of slightly has me leaning to the over in this one as well. Definitely not something I want to do. I think probably playing the Cleveland side might be a little bit of the stronger way to look, just because I think Schmidt is the weakest of the pitchers there, in Cleveland might really have to show up focus here. And it's a change in venue that favors Houston, of course, or Houston. Thank you. Favors Cleveland, of course, but the line is obviously reflecting that. Although I think Yankees are probably being given too much respect, being a road favorite essentially in a matchup like this. So that's the way I look at that one. The other game, the later game, Dodgers-Mets. Dodgers took a 2-1 lead yesterday. This is at the Mets again. This is going to be Yamamoto against Quintana. Dodgers are up from -111 to -132, so a pretty significant move on the Dodgers. And I actually do mostly agree with this one, but there are some factors that make me not want to really come in and take the Dodgers side either here. The Dodgers are public. They're a public team in general, but they won again last night, so now they're up 2-1. So the public kind of off of that Mets hype train a little bit. 65% of tickets, but 79% of the cash on the Dodgers side. 89% of the tickets and 92% of the cash on the over as well. But the line has dropped from 7.5 juice to the over to 7 juice to the over. So it looks like there is some movement on the under as well. And in this one, I don't think I really necessarily disagree with an under in this one, but I think we have some question marks here. I think you don't know which starting pitcher you're going to get really out of either of these guys. So Yamamoto's pitching for the Dodgers. Good rookie season for him. He's a rookie they brought over from the Japan leagues. 3 ERA, 1.11 whip this year. Definitely put together a good rookie campaign. Mixed bag in the postseason so far. He had 1 bad start against San Diego, giving up 5 earned runs in 3 innings. Only struck out 1 in that one. And then he had a better start, going 5 innings in the next start against San Diego as well, right after San Diego had just seen him. So that's not a bad indicator there that San Diego had just seen him and he pitched better and had a 5-inning, 2-hit shutout performance in that one. Only 2-1 strikeout walk ratio, though. So overall, 3.3 strikeout walk ratio doesn't look that great. And 5.63 ERA doesn't look that great in the playoffs. But is this a trend in the right direction? It's hard to tell, given the discrete nature of every one of these starts. So I don't really know exactly. And up against the Mets, it's going to be a different scenario. But he does have good numbers against the Mets. Fairly small sample size, 21. But all of these numbers are pretty good against the Mets. 7-1 strikeout walk ratio, 238 average, 606 OPS. So the Mets have not hit Yamamoto very well. And I think really the only team that did that successfully against him was the Padres. And the Dodgers, unfortunately, based on my rooting interest, got through the Padres, which I don't like. On the other side, Jose Quintana pitching for the Mets, 3.75 ERA, 1.25 whip on the season. He turned his season around, man. I've been saying he's an older pitcher. He's a junk pitcher. Doesn't strike guys out, really. And his numbers were definitely worse in the middle of the season. He really turned it on down the stretch and pitched like a guy that I didn't even recognize, basically. I don't think I've ever seen Quintana pitch like this. If you include his last two playoff starts here, over his previous 8 starts, he's allowed 3 earned runs total and had 5 starts where he allowed no earned runs over that span. That's a ridiculous stretch of games, man. In the month of September, he had a .72 ERA with a 23-6 strikeout walk ratio. He has a 0 ERA in 11 innings in the playoffs so far on a road start against Milwaukee, where he went 6 shutout innings and then 5 shutout innings against Philadelphia to follow that up. 11-3 strikeout walk ratio, and as I said, no runs allowed so far in the playoffs. So he is in his best form of the season. I don't think I've seen him pitch like this throughout his career, to be honest. So he is in very good form right now. And that Milwaukee one, second start there, that playoff start was more impressive because he had just faced them and not done quite as well, and they were more familiar with him at that point. So he is pitching really well recently, but his stats against the Dodgers are not very good. And a huge 154 at-bat sample size, 33-17 strikeout walk ratio, not a good ratio, too many walks. Not really a high strikeout rate against them either. He's not really a strikeout pitcher, though. But the Dodgers hit .299 off him and have an .849 OPS. So it's hard to gauge this one, man, because he's pitching so well recently, Quintana. But his matchup-specific numbers against the Dodgers are really not good. Yamamoto has the better matchup numbers significantly against the Mets hitters, which might be mostly why this line is moved. But Quintana's the more experienced pitcher. He's a much older pitcher, but experience does matter, and he is in really good form right now, whereas Yamamoto's kind of in shaky form. So very hard to gauge this game, man. I still would lean to the Dodgers just because of the matchup-specific stats. And then once you get to the bullpen, I think the Dodgers do have the bullpen advantage and the offensive advantage. But very hard to gauge on that one. And an under might seem to make more sense in this one than in the other game just because Quintana's form has been so good recently. And Yamamoto, that one bad start that he had recently was against the team that hits him the best, the Padres. So he's not facing the Padres anymore. So I think he's a little bit more trustworthy in this game. So that's the way that I look at those. Not going to be a play or anything like that in baseball there. I'm skipping baseball. Hockey is where I'm going to have 2 plays. I'm going to try to make this quick, even though I know we have a full slate of hockey. I'm just going to talk about the games that I actually am playing because I got to get to football here before I get out of here. So let's do that. First play I'm going to be on is going to be on the Vancouver Canucks at even money, plus 100. I have one side, one total today. So I like Vancouver in this one. Florida, they're looking like they're going to be a very public team here. Down from minus 115 to minus 110. 91% of the tickets on them and 98% of the cash. Florida is certainly going to be public here, and why not? They haven't done much wrong so far this season, really. They've had a couple losses in there, I think, but they're 3-2. They're the returning champs, right? So the public's going to be on them just because of that. They had that stretch where they lost a couple, but they're back to form. They beat my Boston Bruins yet again, and then had that game where tough spot for them, man. They went into Columbus and won anyway. That was Johnny Gaudreau night as well, which I completely forgot about. So that made the handicap even stronger on Columbus, and still didn't get there on that one. I'm kind of angry about that. But now Florida, I think they're in a bad spot, Darren. They're in the much worse rest spot here, and they're returning home from a road trip. So the road trip returns tend to be a bad spot in these daily sports. And this is the first one that I'm actually keying on this season, as you have teams that they go on the road trip, they play out that road trip, and then they come back home. It tends to be a distraction. And I think even more so if they have a day off, which usually in hockey they are going to have like one day off on the return home. But it just tends to be a distraction because you have to return back to family life. These are adult men. They have families, they have wives, they have children. They live in the area, so they have home stuff to take care of because they've been away for so long. Man of the house, man. You know what I mean? You got to take care of that stuff, so I always harp on that. The road trip return tends to be a distraction. I know it is Vancouver. That's true, and I don't know if they're going to necessarily overlook a team that was one of the better teams in the Western Conference last year, but I think they might because Vegas is up next. This Vegas team, man, I know Florida got revenge on them last year in the regular season. They beat them both regular season games last year. And Florida, remember, Vegas was the team that eliminated them, that beat them in the Stanley Cup Finals the year prior to that. So I know Florida did get the last laugh, kind of. Florida won the Stanley Cup last year. Of course, it was not against Vegas in a rematch, and they beat Vegas both regular season games. But I still think there's that little part of Florida that's still, I think, going to kind of focus on that Vegas team that beat them in that Stanley Cup final still fairly recently. So I think it is possible they overlooked this Vancouver team. Bobrovsky should be back in net for Florida, though, so that is not going to hurt Florida. I mean, he's obviously their better goalie. Knight, the worst of the two goalies there for sure. Bobrovsky is their usual starter there, so he should be back in net, but still, I think Vancouver, they kind of got something to prove here, man. They're not a bad team, and they have not won yet this season. So I think that might cause Florida to overlook them a little bit. And I think it makes this line look kind of enticing to the public, man. As you can see, the public is coming in on Florida. Like, you're getting a short money line price on Florida here, and it's just like, what gives with this price? Like, really? Like, Florida's the Stanley Cup champions from last year, and they're 3-2, and they're up against basically an 0-3 team, an 0-1-2 team, really, because 2 overtime losses. But they're up against a winless team, and it's basically just almost a pick-em price, and it keeps dropping here, by the way. I don't know if this is going to flip the favor in this game or not, but again, I think it looks too easy to come in on Florida here, and the odds makers are telling you that Florida's not even the better team in this matchup because they don't even have the full home ice advantage here. So the odds makers are telling you something with that. Florida also is still dealing with the injuries I mentioned, over the last couple of games that they played, where I believe that Kachuk, I mean, he's like basically their best player. He's not going to be back for the next couple of games. I think he's slated to return on the 22nd or something like that. So I believe he's not back yet. And Barkov, I think, is still out as well. Kachuk has some illness, which I don't know what the deal is with that, but it seems like he's still has a scheduled return of whenever that is, and it's not yet. And Barkov has some sort of injury there. So Florida dealing with some injuries there. So that factors into the line a little bit, but still, even with your best player injured, this is a hockey game, man. So it's not like football having a quarterback injury where he affects the line like 5 points, some massive amount of points. This is a team sport. You got lines. I mean, your best player, he's going to be out there for what? Like maybe at most, like maybe half of the ice time during the game, I would expect probably. So it matters a bit less in hockey. So this line is still telling you something. Vancouver's underrated right now, man. They're not a bad team. They're really itching for that first win. They've had a lot more rest. I mean, if you look at what Florida's done recently, not only are they returning home from a road trip, but look at this, man. They're playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities. They're playing a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. So that's kind of the dreaded like lack of rest type of spot there. So they really have not had much let up since they've started playing there in the regular season. Since the 8th, they played all these games, and Vancouver's only played 3 games since the 9th, and they had a long stretch off between Philadelphia and Tampa Bay here. And they're coming off their ugliest loss of the season, a 4-1 loss at Tampa, which was the start of a road trip. It should have been a focus spot for Vancouver, and they lost. Maybe they were looking ahead, man, because this is big for Vancouver. They're facing the Stanley Cup champions from last year, man. You know that you're going to be focused on the Stanley Cup Finals, man. Like, that team that won the whole thing last year does have a target on their back. So I think that means Vancouver's going to bring more focus into this game. Maybe it made them lapse in focus against Tampa Bay. Tampa's been a pretty good team recently as well, though. But this game, a little bit misleading. There was an empty net goal there to make it look a little bit worse there. The Lightning scored near the end there. Then looking at the shot discrepancy there, I mean, it was tied between the two teams. So statistically, this game played pretty close. So it's a misleading final result in that one. And then their other 2 losses were both close games as well, and shootout and overtime. So Vancouver, they haven't exactly been playing poorly. They just fell on the wrong side of a couple of games that were close. And then this game actually was kind of close as well. So I like Vancouver in this one to play another tough, close game here. I mean, they have not been a pushover. They're not a pushover, and they're still a good team, man. So I expect them to bring it in this game. I think it's going to be a close game. We don't know who their goalie is going to be in this one, so that's kind of up in the air. But with Vancouver, I don't know if it matters as much. I mean, they got Seelovs is like their worst of the two. Lankinen, I believe, is their starter, even though he's only played one game so far. I'm pretty sure he's the better of their two goalies. So we'll see what happens here, but I would probably expect him to be back in net as they seem to just kind of be alternating. So hopefully it is Lankinen because I think that's the better option for Vancouver here. And because he didn't play in the last game, he hasn't played since the 11th. So I kind of think he is going to be back in there. I would hope for Vancouver there. So hopefully that's going to be the case there. I assume he's their starter, but I could be wrong. Just based on the way they played so far this season, Lankinen has been the better of their goalies there. So I'm on Vancouver plus 100 in that one. And then on the other one, I'm actually I said I should start doing hockey totals. I was right about those last two total leans that I gave out on over. So, it's going to come back to bite me now that I'm playing it over here. And this is Buffalo Columbus over 6.5. So, as soon as I actually play one, it's going to lose, right? Looking at this one, it's basically sitting at 6.5. It looks like it's gone down a little bit. But we see 60% of the tickets are on the under in this one. Neither of these teams really are very impressive scoring teams, so that's kind of the issue as far as like what the public looks for, but neither of these teams are very good as far as the goaltending is concerned either. So that's one thing that I'm looking at as far as the over here. The over has 67% of the cash on the over. So it does look like there is cash, at least for now, coming in towards the over here. Buffalo played last night, man, and they played a tough overtime game, and they blew this game, man. They were winning at Pittsburgh by 2 goals multiple times in the game. And then by the time the second period happened, it was a tied game, and then they were losing in the third period. And then they retook the lead in the third period and then wound up losing, of course, on a Sidney Crosby goal there in overtime. There's Sidney Crosby, by the way. I believe he's played 20 years. This is his 20th season now, all with Pittsburgh, 20 straight years. And I believe Malkin and I forget who else, one other guy on their roster have been on the team for the last 19 years. So it's just crazy that these guys have been around for so long, but they're so old now, man, that they're not what they once were, obviously, but it's just crazy. And I believe the only other starter in Pittsburgh professional sports who's been on a Pittsburgh team for as long as Crosby has, 20 years, was Willie Stargell of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So some cool trivia there for you. But yeah, that was a brutal game for Buffalo. And when you have teams coming off brutal games like that, I think it affects the defense more than the offense, man. It affects the physicality a little bit. And I think you see the defense actually get affected a little bit more. They don't play like quite as intense on the defensive side. And the skaters and the offense can tend to do a little bit actually better in the game rather than worse, even though you'd kind of expect, they're all skated out, right? So they're going to have an under. I don't think that is really the way that it works. And Columbus on the other side, I mean, they're coming off of that emotional high game where I think they should have won, especially because I bet on it against Florida. Big game for them, man. So they're kind of in a letdown spot as well, or hangover spot coming out of that. So both teams kind of in tough spots here, and they only had 1 day of rest. So neither team is rested. Columbus is probably going back to Tarasov and net. Merzlikins was in the previous game there, but Tarasov, I don't even necessarily know that he's the better of the two goalies, man. I mean, his numbers just have not been good so far this year. Really, in his career, they're not good. Merzlikins, I think, actually has the better career numbers. So it's not a good goaltending situation for Columbus. So I think we're looking at a situation here where, Columbus, I mean, their goaltending situations, both of their goalies just do give up goals. Although Tarasov, he actually didn't do that badly against Buffalo specifically last year, except in one specific game. I know last year when Tarasov was in net, I believe it was 2-1 to the under against Buffalo last year. But Buffalo, they're looking like they're probably going to have Levi in net tonight, and they also have a goaltender situation where I don't think that we really have like much of an edge with. Like, I don't think either goalie is really that good here. They got Luukkonen is one of their goalies. It seems like everybody has basically the same name, and Levi is actually the better of their two goalies, and I think he's playing tonight, but he's very young, man. He's 22, and last year, Levi his trends, man, are very over-friendly. So last year, his games, he started out with 3 straight unders, and then since then, if you include his 2 starts this year, they've gone 16-6 to the over in his last 22 starts with them. So after those first 3 starts that he made last year, it's been lots and lots of overs for Levi in these Buffalo games. And I know Buffalo started out with some poor offensive showings here in these games against New Jersey, but I'll kind of ignore that because it was the Czech Republic, and since then, Buffalo's 2-1 to the over. I know both teams have played high-scoring games recently, so maybe that means you get a little bit less value on an over here, but I'm just thinking we're probably going to have some tired teams with not great goalies coming into this one, so I do think both teams are going to be able to score in this one, and as I mentioned, as I was about to say, Levi against Tarasov, the one game that they both specifically played in last year, 13 goals were scored. It was a 9-4 win for Buffalo, I believe. So that's absolutely crazy as well. I forget actually who won that game. And then Columbus also has gotten 2 straight overs here as well, with 1 under in there before that. But, I mean, Columbus, they give up a lot of goals, man. That's just an issue with them. Their goaltending is just not very good. So I'm on the over in that one for those reasons. So I do like that one. And now we'll get to football here. So those are the 2 plays, both in hockey. Getting to the football plays here as we got NHL and college football here. College football, we have 2 games, so I think I can get this done, get through these games. I don't have a whole lot to say about these. The first game is actually the second game listed here, Georgia State and Marshall. So we get a Sun Belt matchup. I think Marshall up from 8.5 to 9. Odds makers telling you Marshall's a significantly better team here, but they are quite public with 86% of tickets and only 62% of the cash. So Marshall, they have been a covering machine, Matt. I think they're 4-1 against the spread. Or 5-1 even maybe. So the public, if they've won on Marshall in the past this year, I don't think they're going to change what they're doing because Marshall has been good to them. As far as the total, we see it down from 52.5 to 51.5 with juice to the over. 67% of the tickets and only 50% of the cash on the over. So I would actually kind of slightly lean to the under in this one because I think it's kind of a weird situation where Marshall, I mean, their offense is kind of strange to me where they have dual quarterbacks there. They have one guy who throws the ball and then another guy who is a dual threat quarterback, and they use them both. Just kind of a bizarre situation there. And then I don't know what goes on the Georgia State side, but Georgia State is not a very good team in general. They're coming off a couple of Sun Belt losses here. Their best game was obviously this win over Vandy, but I'm guessing Vandy probably just overlooked them because Vandy was like, oh, we're playing a Sun Belt team. Vandy may have just looked past them because they had a big game against Missouri up next. They're about to start SEC play. So I think Vandy probably kind of just got caught in this game, to be honest. Georgia State did outplay them, though, a bit. They outgained them. So not really a misleading result there, but kind of just a strange result there. And Georgia State did get crushed by their bigger brother, Georgia Tech, as well. So those are their 2 big games. In Sun Belt play, Georgia State has not been good, 0-2. So they're coming off of that. Both of these teams, I believe, played midweek games last week. So I think they're both on like 5 days rest, essentially 4 or 5 days rest. Actually, no, they both played on Saturday. Excuse me. I think both of these teams did play on Saturday. So they're both on a short week here. So I don't know what we're going to take away from that. Georgia State at least has been kind of consistent as far as their offensive personnel. As you've seen, Veilleux, their quarterback, has been the guy the whole time. Brock has been their best rusher the whole time, although not impressive stats there. And Hurst has been their top receiver the whole time. So their offense kind of looking a little bit one-dimensional in the direction of the pass to me, in a way. I don't think it's just a very good offense in general, really. And then Marshall, looking at their schedule, I mean, they've been covering a lot of games here, although they're 3-3. They did play Ohio State and Virginia Tech, both on the road. So those are both almost automatic losses for them. An automatic win also against an FCS Stony Brook. So I think we can almost kind of ignore Stony Brook and Ohio State and look at their other 4 games. And they've played decent. I mean, the odds makers telling you they're the better team, obviously. But they've faced bad defenses for the most part. So I don't really know what we're going to really take away from that. Like, they haven't really faced any great teams. So Georgia State's not a great team either. This Marshall team, I mean, you look at what they've been doing here. Like, their dual threat quarterback here, Braxton, was their leading rusher 2 games ago. So they do run it a lot, actually. This Marshall team runs the ball more than they throw it. So they're a rush-heavy offense. And they trade off, I said, between Earl, who's more of their throwing quarterback, and Braxton is their dual threat. And they use both of them. So I don't know what the deal is with that, really. This is really tough to gauge. But, I mean, I kind of lean towards the Georgia State side and the under in this one, just because I think it's kind of like something's got to give in this one, where public, I think, is just too trigger happy on Marshall here. And as far as what games have they actually covered by that number? Well, they've only covered that number against App State, and App State seems to be down this year as well. In Stony Brook, they did, but I mean, you can kind of throw that out, I think. Of course, I mean, they're not going to be winning by margin against two teams that are way better than they are, but since they've started conference play, it's been difficult for them. They should have won by margin against Georgia Southern, though. I don't know what the deal was in this game, dude. Marshall was winning 23-3 going into the fourth quarter of this game. It was 23-3 with 6 minutes left, and they gave up 21 straight points, and it wasn't even on 3 straight touchdowns. Like it was on 3 touchdowns, but it was on a safety and then 3 touchdowns, and they were still winning 23-11 with like 2 minutes left, and they gave up a touchdown. And then I don't know how Georgia Southern got the ball back again here and scored again in the final minutes of the game. Just very odd implosion by Marshall. I mean, the graph on this is unlike anything I've ever seen. It was Marshall's 99% to win the game for basically this entire time, and then what the hell just happened? In the very last second, they give up a safety and 3 touchdowns. Just crazy. They lost the turnover battle and the yardage battle, and that was so Marshall. This game is just really tough for me to read, man. There's not a whole, I mean, I shouldn't even be talking about it that much because there's really not a lot to say on this one. But with the market indicators, the lean would be to the Georgia State side and the under in this one. But there just really is not a whole lot going on as far as the scheduling situation is concerned that puts me on one side or the other. I mean, Marshall does have UL Monroe next, and they're undefeated in the conference. I mentioned them. They keep pulling off upsets. They won last week as a favorite, too, so my lean was wrong in that one. UL Monroe, maybe they're actually better than we thought they were, and the market just hasn't caught up to them. I don't know, but maybe that's cause for a little bit of a look ahead from Marshall. Yeah, because Georgia State just hasn't really done much at all in conference, so it is possible Marshall does kind of overlook Georgia State here, as Georgia State's coming off more embarrassing losses in the last couple of games, so maybe that's the way I look at that. Old Dominion, at the very least, is good defensively, though, and that was their most recent loss. And then we have BC, Virginia Tech. This is an interesting game. We got a nice ACC matchup here. BC is one of those dreaded public underdogs, though. We see Virginia Tech up from 7 with juice to 7.5, so a slight move there, but kind of a key number there was 7.5, so still fairly slight, though, because it was 7 with juice, but the books did go to the 7.5. 59% of tickets and only 55% of the cash on BC. So BC, again, like I said, they're a public underdog in this one, man, because the public's looking at this and thinking, oh, BC's 4-2 and Virginia Tech's 3-3, man. So how can we not take an underdog of a touchdown who has the better record with BC, right? But the odds makers, I don't like that public sentiment there, man, where the line tells you more than what the public thinks, man. Public perception can be wrong a lot of times, and the odds makers, they're the ones that have money on this, so they know what they're doing, and they're telling you Virginia Tech is the better team here. So I do lean to that side just based on the fact that it's a misleading spread there alone, and it's a dreaded public underdog on BC. My BC Eagles, though, although I didn't go to BC, but they are kind of the home college team here. They're the one that has the best college athletic programs, which is sad at this point because they're not great. Totals down from 49 juice to the over to 48.5, so somewhat of a, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a significant move, but it's a decent move there. I mean, it has moved a bit towards the under. 71% of tickets on the over and 65% of the cash on the over, so the public's coming in on the over in this one, man. I think they kind of look at these two teams and think these teams' quarterbacks are better than they actually are, with Castellanos for BC, and then Drones. Drones, by the way, I call his passes drones bombs. So Castellanos and Drones, and this one is the matchup there. They're both decent quarterbacks. They're both dual-threat quarterbacks. So Virginia Tech does a lot more damage on the ground, actually. So I kind of like the under in this one as well. I think it's kind of misleading. I think Virginia Tech could slow this game down a little bit. Both these teams, I think, didn't play on Saturday. So I think they're both actually off of buys, technically. So they have a little bit over a week of rest here. BC, they lost to Virginia. I don't know if Castellanos was back in this game or not. He was. So he missed the previous game against Western Kentucky, I think. He came back, but they lost to a pretty underrated Virginia team, to be honest. Virginia, not bad. BC lost that game. Virginia, actually, I think, came back in that game and then won. Had had some heart there. Now BC is having to play 2 straight road games, although both in the state of Virginia, but playing that Virginia back-to-back there. It's not really an easy situation, man. So I think BC, they're in a little bit of a tough spot there for that reason. Virginia Tech, I mean, I know BC has played Missouri, so that's not an easy opponent there. Virginia Tech has faced Vandy, which that loss doesn't look that bad now that Vandy has beaten Alabama. I don't know what this home loss was to Rutgers, but maybe it was kind of a bad spot, actually. Virginia Tech might have overlooked Rutgers a little bit, looking ahead to Miami, and they played toe-to-toe with Miami. We remember what happened in that game, man. Virginia Tech lost on the overturned play that took 10 minutes to overturn Virginia Tech's potentially game-winning touchdown at the end there against Miami. And then off of that brutal way to lose that game, they crushed Stanford, having to go out, second straight road game out to the Pacific Coast. But it was a bad spot for both teams in that one. Stanford was in a sandwich spot, as I pointed out. They were returning back to the Pacific Coast from Clemson, I think. So they had a lot of travel there as well. And Stanford had, I believe, Notre Dame was up next for them. So they were in a sandwich spot there as well. So that was not a good spot for them either. And I believe Stanford's quarterback didn't play in that game. So take from that what you will, but I think kind of a misleading result there for Virginia Tech. But it was a bad spot for Stanford, and Stanford was without their quarterback. But still, Virginia Tech's now playing at home for the first time in quite a while. Last time they were at home, they had that kind of embarrassing loss. So I think they're going to want to get. They don't. This is actually their first ACC home game, man. This late into the season, this is their ACC home opener, and it's on primetime ESPN. So I do think they're going to show up for this one, man. And the odds makers are telling you they're actually the better team. They run the ball. BC is kind of known for running the ball, but BC's rushing attack hasn't been very good, so their offense is a bit more one-dimensional. Their defense has been pretty good against the run, though, so I can see them being able to slow down Virginia Tech a little bit as well. So I like the under in this one, but I do also like Virginia Tech on the side. So that's where the market is indicating on both of these. Boston College, I mean, their offense, like I said, they've been kind of struggling since they started facing higher caliber opponents. So they've been able to, teams have been able to slow them down because they can't run the ball like a lot of BC teams of old. Castellanos, I mean, he does damage with his feet. He's a pretty good quarterback. He's a stud, but he doesn't have a whole lot around him. And BC, like I said, their defense is at least, even though I don't think it's very good against the pass, their defense is more tuned to be able to slow down Virginia Tech as Virginia Tech runs the ball more. And then this NFL game we got on Thursday before I get out of here, oh man, this game is really, really ugly. You got 2 rookie quarterbacks in this one. This is Broncos Saints. I'm not going to play this game, but the Broncos have flipped from a 2.5 underdog to a 3-point favorite. But the line came out at actually 2.5 with the Broncos favored. The plus 2.5 was back when we thought Derek Carr might actually come back for the Saints in this game, but he isn't. So this is not like that significant of a line move. So just keep that in mind that once it was announced Spencer Rattler, the rookie, is starting again for the Saints, Broncos came out at a 2.5-point favorite. So the odds makers are telling you the Broncos are the better of these two teams as a road favorite on a short week. And you know, on these short weeks, when teams go to a place that they're not familiar with playing, like the Broncos are having to do here, the Saints, I don't believe they have much travel here. Broncos have to go into New Orleans. Usually it's a disadvantage for the road team going into that unfamiliar venue, but the Saints are so injury depleted that the Broncos are favored by this much in this spot on the road. It's crazy. And the line's moved up on them, and the Saints are looking like a public underdog here. Public still playing their hand with the Saints, I think, just because of the ghosts of the Saints offense, kind of like they like that the Saints like score points, and they actually scored a decent amount of points last week against Tampa, but the Saints, in 3 of the 4 quarters, they didn't score any points in that game. It was bizarre. They scored 27 all in the second quarter, didn't score in any of the other quarters in the game, and they gave up like 24 or 27 unanswered points after they had taken the lead in that game. Tampa Bay just ran away with it. Just really ridiculous game there, but public likes the fact that the Saints are putting up these points. In the first 2 games they did, and then in that game against Tampa they did, but keep in mind, the Saints, their injuries are massive, man. After their first 2 games, they lost their Pro Bowl center, McCoy. That's something I pointed out going into that Kansas City game. Since McCoy has been out, the Saints have lost every single game. They've lost all 4 games without him, and their offensive line has been in shambles since then, man. They have other line injuries as well. They got a bad cluster injury situation on the offensive line. Their entire offense is injured, man, and that's why we're seeing a really low total here, and we're seeing a Broncos favorite here. I mean, this is just wild how many injuries the Saints have. That offensive line is not going to be able to protect Rattler, which is not good either. Carr actually is really fast at getting the ball out of his hands, so he can kind of mitigate the bad offensive line a little bit. Rattler, as a rookie, is probably going to get a little rattled in this one, if I had to guess. That offensive line is out, man. Really bad situation for the Saints. And then they're without their top 2 wide receivers as well in this game with Olave, and then I forget who their number 2 is, but their top 2 wide receivers are both out, so Rattler is missing a lot of his targets as well. So Kamara is really going to have to shoulder the load here. And the Broncos' defense has been good. So public coming in on the Saints, I think just because of the ghosts of the Saints' offense. But this Saints' offense is so massively injured that it just doesn't make sense to me. 60% of tickets, only 57% of the cash there. The total's gone down from 37 to 37 or 37.5 to the under with juice on 37.5. 68% of the tickets and 78% of cash on the over. But I think that line move is actually more significant. I like the under here. I mean, you got 2 rookie quarterbacks. Both defenses are actually the better units. Now, who would say that with the Saints, that their defense is the better unit? But it is, because their offense is so injury depleted. The Saints' defense is actually the better unit in this one. And the Broncos, of course, have Bo Nix, rookie quarterback, on their side. He's been struggling this season as well, man. He has not been very good. So both these offenses struggle. The Broncos' defense is the best unit on the field out of either of these teams. So that's what we got going on here. It's a short week. Both teams are coming off losses. The Broncos were down 23-0, I think, in the fourth quarter of the game against the Chargers, and they made it look respectable, but I think the Chargers also kind of took their foot off the gas. So this Broncos offense really has not been good. In New Orleans, with this just massively injured offense, hasn't been good either, and they're coming off a real ugly loss. So they are going to be motivated. Both teams are going to be motivated to try to turn this around, man. But, I mean, what can you can only do so much with this offense being so injured. New Orleans, with that game against Tampa Bay in their last game. So I like the Broncos side here and the under in this one, even though laying 3 on the road with this low of a total, not something I would really want to do. You'd have to get the 2.5 to even consider the Broncos, but even that just seems wild to be laying a price with this offense that can't really do anything on a short week, having to go into an unfamiliar venue, and that keeps me off of this game. This game is just bad in general. This is a cluster. Thanks to the schedule makers again for giving us this game on Thursday night, where it looks like it could be a low-scoring game, man. When you have kind of the unfamiliarity aspect, the teams kind of like start feeling each other out a little bit, I think, and I think it kind of makes the game a little bit less high-scoring as well. And both coaches probably don't want their rookie quarterbacks to be having to shoulder the load here. So you could see a lot of maybe rushing in this game. Oh, what's up, Eric? Thank you, sir. I'm about to get out of here. But that's the way that I look at this game. I don't think there's anything really more to say. I think I pointed out basically everything I wanted to in that one. But, yeah, I mean, the Saints would be the favorite in this one, of course, if they were not monstrously injured in this game. But their entire offense is injured. So it's just a crazy, crazy bad situation there, man. So that's going to do it for me. 2 plays in hockey today. Vancouver Canucks plus 100 on the money line, and Buffalo Columbus over 6.5. Let's get it done, man. I want to get some wins here. Let's get back on track. I'm still hovering right around that break-even point. I want to have another nice run as we come down the stretch here to make this a winning year. Let's go, because the last month overall has been good, even though I've been a little bit stagnant recently. So let's get it done, man. Thanks for hanging out. Tower Gang Tone on Twitter, of course, and follow the Tower Gang podcast, of course. You'll find it on all the platforms. We had Owen Benjamin on last night, baby. Fun episode last night. Go to patreon.com/Tower Gang and subscribe to the Patreon. Yeah, throw us a follow, man. Throw us some support there, man. You get bonus content, pre-show, post-show, just everything. You get to hang out with us in a Telegram. That's going to do it for me, man. I'm kind of off right now. I'm in a rush. Got to get out of here. Have a good one, man. Thanks for hanging out. Peace.